I do apologize in advance because I thought I could fit all of my OC lore into one video. But now that I'm going and doing a bunch of footnotes on things to talk about, this was not the case. There is just so much that I have to explain. So I'm hoping to divide it by main characters, the basic lore, a timeline maybe within that other video, and other side characters. Because there's just so much content, and I low-key forgot. So bear with me. I know I say that a lot, but you really have to listen for this one. To start off, I think I need to give some basic background. Obviously, this is very light, as in, this doesn't cover as much about the nitty-gritty parts. I think the most important thing to know is there are higher beings. They're called the divine representatives. They're basically deities, and they embody concepts. So there's a bunch of different concepts that they embody, and they each have their own nation based around that concept. And humans were created by life, the deity concept, divine representative. But there are also different types of humans, but each of them have their own drawbacks alongside abilities. So it is very fantasy-esque-ish? Not really. Modern fantasy. Second thing. So much death and rebirth. Whenever I explain this lore to somebody, they're like, man, everyone's kind of dying. And I'm like, you're right. And then they come back. So, I don't know. There's a lot of change, death, rebirth are very common themes. So if you hear about people dying and then coming back and or not coming back, that is the reason. So now that those two very important things, I think, are out of the way, let's kind of just get in there. Basically, the main characters, or at least the ones that I focus on the most, because I really don't know what medium I would ever tell this story on. They are within a group called the Vassals, which are basically under Justice, which is the nation of Vinca. I named the nations after flowers. I'm still workshopping that, okay? So that's their placeholder name. Vinca is Justice, and they're trying to repair the life conditions of that nation, because it's not going good over there. The main-ish character, or at least one of the characters that I think I focus on the most, because there are two protagonists as a whole, is Ceageis. A lot of, I think, the inspirations that I put into Ceageis, at least recently, within the past year or so, have come from mediums like visual kei. So a lot of their music playlist has some of that inspiration around it. You can see it in their design, and yeah, that was my biggest, because I like to tie fashion in, or different unique outfits into each character, vaguely. So, Ceageis, I think, is the biggest one, and the most obvious. Ceageis is the first of the Vassals, and the vessel, technically, for the divine representative of Justice. So, she's basically stuck in a role that she didn't intentionally want, or didn't really understand the severity of when she took the role. So, that's a bummer. And I guess another fun fact about her is she has the most inconsistent design out of every character that have in that little circle. Because I know I talked about this in the past video, Ceageis started out as a stickman and just kind of slowly evolved from there. She's had 10 million different hairstyles, right? More than that, she's had so many different outfits because I never know what I want to put her into. She started out with I think blue eyes, and then I slowly transitioned more into the yellow color palette. You can kind of see there was a progression where it's more fun and cartoony, and then I slowly built up into a more serious and rounded character. And I don't know, I think I just recycled her so much that she became a completely different thing. So, good for her. I think Ceia is one of the characters who dies originally and then comes back. Wow, crazy, guys. So, the whole reason that she is a vessel of justice, or is the new divine representative of justice, is because around the time that she was 12 years old, her and her best friend were kind of trying to figure out this very bizarre chain of events that linked to her best friend's family and the disappearances of her siblings. And within that, she was able to learn a little bit more about the different representatives, and specifically the representative of order. And that ended up getting her killed at some point within the story. She meets the representative of justice in the afterlife, where she finds out that she was intended to be one of many vessels for the representative of justice, because the whole thing is that fella doesn't want to do his job no more. And there has been thousands of different variants of her that have just kind of existed and lived their entire lives without knowing any of this. So she just got the unlucky pick of the draw. She is one of the more serious, heavy lore characters, but she's also a loser. I'm so sorry, Ceia. Don't mention Star Wars around this lady. That's one of her many very specific interests that I know I wanted her to have from the beginning. I don't remember why I gave her that interest, but she loves Star Wars. She has like a whole board of just like the Star Wars events. I think it's really funny to just give them a specific interest that is kind of outside of my own. So there's that. That's Ceia. Okay, now we're moving on. Our second protagonist is Ageis, and Ageis' storyline happens simultaneously with Ceia's, and there's a moment in time where their two storylines deviate from each other, but then they end up converging, like meeting again. So Ageis is the best friend of Ceia. They've known each other since they were children. Yeah, they're the lesbians. I think I have 2 videos of them together. One during the actual conflict that led to Ceia's death, and then the moments following that. Ageis' design was based on multiple different things, but I think the first 2 that come to mind was very vague retrofuturism and most like abstract concepts with minimalism, shapes, colors, all that type of stuff. Ageis in the lore is one of the many descendants of Order, which is the divine representative of Order, guys. It's so crazy! She is one of many different spry folk, which are spider-like creatures that need sustenance to survive, and that sustenance is, content warning, human flesh. Youch. The thing is, though, since she's half, and most of them are half, they don't necessarily need that to survive. Ageis found that out very, very quickly when she was taken in right after Ceia's death with other spry folk. She is allergic to meat, so she can't exactly do any of the traditions and practices already ingrained in because of her meat allergy. So I just found that really funny. That ended up being a plot point that unironically saved her a lot of distress and completely changed the course that she took. Just some fun facts about Ageis is her name is spelled wrong. So lore-wise, because that was not the intention originally when I had Ageis. Ageis' name is supposed to be Aegis, like Aegis, I think. But her father spelled the name wrong on the birth certificate, and nobody bothered to correct it or knew that it was spelled incorrectly. So her entire life she's just been called Ageis. And that is my explanation for her incorrect spelled name, because it was my initial wrongdoing that ended up with her having a misspelled name. But I think it would be funny to just kind of integrate that into the Merverse. So that's why that's a thing. I think design-wise, in contrast with Ceageis, she's had probably one of the most consistent designs, sort of, besides facial proportions changing and colors changing. So Ceageis and Ageis actually ended up swapping palettes like halfway through, because Ceageis was originally more aligned with blue and Ageis was more yellow. But I ended up switching that and making that a plot point later. That's like the biggest thing that changed, but she's always kind of had 2 pigtails and those silly little glasses. And I think in her original design, she didn't even have any like limbs. They were like floating boots and gloves. I really don't know what I was thinking with that one. But now you know. Moving on to characters that are kind of main characters, but also just not the protagonist. There's ERIMN. And ERIMN's design was originally like more pop idol-y like, in the sense that it was more frilly and poofy and over the top sort of design, but not very overtly over the top. Just in terms of my other designs, it was a lot more cheesy. Funnily enough, he had the most popular video on my oldest channel that I think I've talked about in the past. It was a lip sync test for whatever purpose I was doing, and for whatever reason that video got fairly popular, and to this day I still think it's pretty funny whenever I look at it. It wasn't a bad animation per se, it was just a little bit goofy, so that existed. And in terms of lore, ERIMN is one of the only remaining of his kind, because he is not from Earth, basically. And his planet was destroyed in a conflict with another, and it resulted in their destruction. He was able to make it out alive, ended up here, and kind of just rebranded. And so singing and music is his way of kind of channeling that grief into a positive way and sort of remembering all of those fallen people. Great guy. So next up is Pearlie. Pearlie started out as an Animal Crossing character, or at least my Animal Crossing persona, sort of. And the whole theme around my original Animal Crossing world, island, whatever you would call it, was intended to be like nuclear fallout. That's why there's a bunch of like anthropomorphic talking animals. It wasn't good by any means, but that was like my basis of the lore on that island. I think I tried to write about it for NaNoWriMo. It did not work out, but that's where she kind of had her roots in. But at some point I kind of converged Pearlie into the lore with all of my other characters. Another cool fact about her is one of her descendants become relevant later, because I do think that there's multiple different parts of this that have large gaps of time in between them. So she does have descendants that become relevant later. Yay! And I guess the last fun fact about her is she is essentially Ceageis' cousin. Not by blood, because Ceageis does not have birth parents, because, you know, the whole vessel thing. But she did end up getting adopted by one of Pearlie's uncles. So, by default, they are related, kind of honorifics-wise. But yeah, they're both Ironas. They are cousins. Crazy! These next few are fairly recent, as in I think I've made them within the past year or two, but probably within the last year. So there's not, I guess, a lot of history or fun facts that I can disclose about them, because there isn't. Our next character is Kelis. Kelis started out from that one Pokemon game that I tried on mobile for a while. I think it was called Pokemon Unite. It was kind of like Mobile Legends or like League of Legends, but it was Pokemon. And I mained Gardevoir on there. And there was a bunch of different little cute outfits. For whatever reason, I decided to make like my trainer on there like a Gardevoir specialist, whatever. That's how his design started out. It's just kind of evolved completely from there. I kind of just want to put like a side-by-side just so you know how much this character has changed. And I think it's really funny because in that way he's kind of similar to Saya, where it started out as a very non-serious character and then became a very relevant plot-heavy device. So, poor dude, but also it was needed. He is technically the oldest of the Vassals, both physically and linearly. As in, he was born first. He's probably like 1,000-ish years old, which I know that sounds very complicated, but it's not. I swear if I make a timeline, it will make sense. But he's also the oldest in appearance, I think, because he's in around his early mid-30s. He's kind of stuck in like this death time loop of sorts, as in every time he does end up dying, it's not necessarily permanent because he always kind of comes back. So that's why he's lived as long as he does, or he is the age that he is because he's constantly coming back over and over again. And that is because of the representative of life, and I think I'll talk about that when I talk about all of the deities separately, hopefully. And he never met his mother. So one of the many cool things about his character is he is kind of a dragon shapeshifter of sorts, as in his appearance and bodily structure can transmutate into a dragon. And that comes from his mother, who is a dragon adjacent species. And he never met her when he was originally born, and he just kind of lived out his entire life without knowing her. So, no mother, that really sucks. And his mother is still alive, and that's relevant for another character. But yeah, he's just never met her. Kelis, basically, existed thousands of years ago-ish. There was a conflict that was going on within the divine representatives, but also on Earth itself. And he was involved in the many wars that conspired during that time. And the actual end of that long-standing war was because he ended up being the device to dissipate the divine representative of vengeance. But as a whole, he didn't really end up dying permanently because the representative of life felt bad, brought him back. Hey, you're stuck living forever, but, So he is stuck in that death time loop eternally. Ain't that great? This next character that is relevant-ish is Goob. Goob was a Roblox OC, or at least I originally created her design through Roblox avatar catalog. Not the game, like the actual Roblox catalog thing. And I think the original, basis of her design existed even, a little bit longer than a year or two ago. But, I still have screenshots of when I created the original design for Goob, and I used her in my Korean barbecue, little roleplay thing I did with my friends. I just think it's really funny. It still exists somewhere in my camera roll. She also started out in a separate universe, whatever. I didn't originally intend for her to converge with the rest of my lore, but then I kind of found a way to slide her in there. But she started off in a like techno-punk-ish world of sorts, and her design kind of was based around that as a result, but it's kind of shifted more into twee and teen girl outfits. I don't know. I just like dressing her up in fun little outfits whenever I have a really cute outfit idea or concept. It usually results in me drawing Goob in it. As much as I do love all of my characters, I hold them so near and dear to my heart. Goob will always be my favorite. I love you, Goob. You're great. And a lot of my pins that I talked about in my video before are majority Goob. Goob is the little character that I plan on making an Ida bag for at some point. But yeah, Goob is my favorite. I don't think I could fit enough speed paints of her in this video, so we're working with what I can. Our next character is Struit. Struit is Goob's twin brother. Technically speaking, Struit has no direct inspiration, but I think you could see the vague ties to other like alternative movements in fashion. I didn't really know what I was doing with Struit's design. All I really knew was I wanted it to be the exact opposite of Goob's. So in terms of personality and character design, he is the exact opposite of Goob. So that's just a little fun thing. They balance each other out in every sense. But yeah, some fun facts about Struit is he hates the color green. And there are lore-specific reasons as to why he hates the color green, but he especially hates yellow-green. Especially. Hates that color. And because of his personality, I think he has probably the worst relationship with everyone within the Vassals. But, again, that's not specifically as in, like, the serious sense that he has difficult relationships with all of them. It's more like he's jokingly probably has the worst relationships with everybody there. But yeah, that's Struit. I don't think there's a lot I can say about him. I think if I'm doing the lore heavy video, then I can for sure. Now that I've explained Goob and Struit, because they are sort of conjoined in their lore. Not conjoined in the literal sense, but in the narrative sense. They were both artificially made divine representatives, because there are the main divine representatives, but there are also sub-concepts and lesser gods. So Goob is under elation, and Struit is under mania. And they work in harmony of sorts with each other, but since they are slightly separate concepts, they cannot overpower the other in the general devouring sense. So they balance each other out, sort of. They also started off in separate worlds than specifically Earth, and they were created to be sort of bioweapons for that planet in their conflict with, funnily enough, ERIMN's planet is the different planet they were having conflicts with, and though they were never officially used in battle because they did end up escaping before that, ERIMN's world still got destroyed by the planet that created Goob and Struit. So, yeah, Bummer Town. They also ended up on Earth and are currently under the care of Kelis. And these last two are fairly recent, as in, like, probably the most recent additions to this. In the past few months. Not even, like, the past few months. Maybe, like, 6 months at most. They were created this year. Mirian is mostly known as Duck Duck by everyone else within the group. He is the second most recent character, and he's the half-brother of Kelis. And he vaguely knew about Kelis' existence before, but he was born not particularly as long ago as Kelis was, but he was born within the 20s-ish. And he's technically, I think at that point, 98. He is a descendant or has ties to the divine representative of goodwill. And yeah, he has 2 moms. One of his mothers is the biological mother of Kelis, so that is why they are sort of related in that sense. But he only met Kelis fairly recently, when he kind of just barged into his life and was like, hey, I know you don't know our mom, but I'm your half-brother. Nice to meet you. And I think I talked about that in my very poorly explained OC lore video in the past, but that's basically where we are with that right now. And fun fact about him is he has major beef with Struit specifically. And I guess they're kind of best friends who also simultaneously hate each other-ish, because they do have interests and things that overlap with each other, but they also can't stand each other. So, just a little fun fact about him. The last character, and probably, I think, the newest and most recent addition, is Signe. Not Sigma. I swear, if I hear anyone say Sigma, I'm gonna cry. Because I realized only when I verbally said her name, because she's always existed writing-wise, but Signe sounds really close to that other word. And now I am sitting here recording and I'm like, oh my god, it sounds like that word. Anyway, Signe is also very new in terms of lore significance, so I don't think I have anything crazy to talk about those two. But, she's slightly more significant than a side character. And I think her inspirations are very obvious when I look at, the different references I used. But her colors are directly pulled from the symbol from the divine representative of life. And that is who she's pulled from, or a descendant linked to-ish. So, yeah, that's all of my main characters, and holy cow, this video is long. And this was not very lore heavy. I think it's just explaining each of the characters, fun facts about them, and the vague tie-ins they have in the story. I think once I've introduced all of the important parts of the lore, as in the characters, the world, I think the second video is definitely going to be more lore heavy, as I'm describing all of the divine representatives and their significance. So I hope to do more of these when I don't have a topic to talk about, so I'll just yap about my OCs instead. But yeah, if you have any questions or you would like to know more about any of these listed characters, please let me know. I can try to explain these better, and I'm sure I will at another time. But for now, that's all I have. Thank you!